Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for the How to Beat the Resume Robot webinar. My name is Dr. Mary Catherine Arnold, and I am the Director of Student Affairs here for the online campus of South College. Before we get started, I would just like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. The first thing I'd like to remind everyone for is that you have all been muted. So it's important to note that should you have any questions throughout today's presentation, you can just type them into that Q&A box or the questions and answer box, either at the top or the bottom of your screen. I'll make sure that I set some time aside throughout today's presentation as well as at the conclusion of the presentation to review all the questions that might come up. I also wanted to remind everyone that this presentation is being recorded. So although I hope that everyone has a pen and paper on hand so that they can go ahead and take some notes as we go through the presentation, should you happen to miss any of the information, you can always access this recording by either emailing me directly or emailing me through any of the reminder emails that you received about today's session. In addition, I will make sure that this presentation and this recording becomes available on our YouTube page in the upcoming weeks as well. I also would like to just inform everyone that within this session, you are going to have some audience participation. So please be prepared to participate by either answering things in the chat box as we go along, or with also taking participation in some of the polls that you might see come across your screen. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and begin discussing how to beat the resume robot. So tonight's session, we're going to cover a couple of different things regarding the resume robot. In order to help us to really understand how to overcome the resume robot, it is first important to understand what happens with your resume and your application once you go ahead and you hit that apply button. We will also take a look at what the purpose is and the function and the focus of the robot, as well as some of the various barriers that resume robot can create within our job search. We'll also talk about some of the resources that makes and why these types of resources are so appealing to some of the companies out there in the first place. And because by being able to understand the purpose of what the resume robot is, what it's really going to do is it's going to be able to help us to understand and better understand what it is that these companies are looking for, as well as how it identifies those quote unquote qualified candidates. In addition, we will talk about some of the tips and tricks that you can use to get past the robot, since there are a couple of items that the resume robot is going to be searching for anytime that it's looking at your resume. There are certain steps that we can take as job candidates to help make sure that our resume is getting to that hiring manager and to that recruiter for further review. And then lastly, part of this presentation that you're going to see is that we're going to just put the skills that we have in action. So practice makes perfect. So what we're going to be doing at the conclusion of this presentation is we're going to take a look at a couple different examples that demonstrate so that you can get a full idea of how to overcome those barriers that resume robot provides to you. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you all feel fairly confident with the ways to start your job search moving forward. So let's go ahead and jump in. Many people think that you submit your application and it goes straight to that recruiter or the hiring manager for review. But I will say I do have some bad news for anyone who thinks that this is still the standard process. Yes, this used to be a fairly common process for applications and applicants and even like the recruiters and the hiring managers. Probably about, I would say at this point, about 15 years ago, this was a pretty standard part of the application process. But once we started getting applicant tracking systems and the resume robot, it really kind of changed the way our applications go when we apply to positions. Nowadays, when you apply to a job, you have many more steps that your application must take before getting to that hiring manager and getting that job offer. So let's take a look at what actually happens to your application when you apply. So you'll see on your screen, that first step, it's still the same, where you will need to apply for a job. Your resume now typically gets sent to a resume robot or a system that is better known as the applicant tracking system. So sometimes the applicant tracking system is ATS for short. So if you hear me say that throughout tonight's presentation, that's what I'm talking about. Once it goes through that applicant tracking system, At that point, then that's when it's going to go to the recruiter. That recruiter is going to be the person who then kind of decides whether you, as an applicant, your information should go onto the hiring manager, who would make the final decision on whether or not you should be that individual to receive that job offer. So, based off of the pathway for your application, we're going to have a quick little poll. Based off of that, what do you think is the reason why so many companies use the resume robot? So go ahead and click your answer on your screen. It looks like we're still waiting for a couple of people. Okay. So it looks like a large majority of us is there. We're all stating that it's to make the recruiter's life easier. Well, the reality of the situation is that companies use applicant tracking systems for a variety of reasons. One of the most popular reasons that you're going to see is that it helps to handle a high volume of applicants. You might not realize this as a job seeker, but the number of people who are applying for that same position as you, they typically are very high. A recent report done in 2017 by Employment Background Investigations found that an average of 250 applicants applied for each opening. Can you imagine if you were a recruiter and your job was to read over 250 applications and resumes for just one opening? Keep in mind that, a recruiter probably has at least 10 openings at any given time that they're working with, and that's at a minimum. But so can you imagine 250 applicants per each opening? That's just a lot. I don't think if you were a recruiter that you would ever find time to eat or sleep. And that's something just to really kind of think about and put it into perspective. Because just think, if the recruiter has to fill 10 job openings simultaneously in that week, that would probably be over at the end of it about 3,000 resumes and applications that they're looking through to figure out which individuals should receive phone calls and interviews for phone screens, and even scheduling those face-to-face interviews, because the recruiter's job is that main person who's typically going to try and facilitate what those qualified applicants are going to go through. Now, the applicant tracking systems are also used to expedite the candidate review process. So, not only are these recruiters inundated with resumes and applicants, but being able to have a part of this process automated allows the recruiters to review candidates more quickly to consider you or consider the applicants for the next part of that process. So, in addition, a lot of these systems also have functions that help to keep recruiters on track and schedule interviews. This means that if the system is able to automatically qualify a candidate, it can immediately put an interview for you right onto that recruiter's calendar, which is going to, at the end of the day, speed up that process for you. And so, like I said, yes, it is partially to make that recruiter's life easier, but it also is there to help make it a smoother process for you to hopefully feel better about your the process that you've endured as a candidate. Now, another major role of the ATS is to remove any of the unqualified candidates. So you have to remember that just because there are a lot of candidates that are applying for this job, not all of them are going to meet the basic qualifications. Some organizations are very, very strict, where if the job description states that, a bachelor's degree is required, then the applicant tracking system is scanning that resume for those and only those who have a bachelor's degree. And this can be done with, even if they state that they prefer someone with a higher degree, like a master's degree, even though it is only preferred and not required, like that bachelor's degree would be, that might still put that individual higher in the selection process if that person has a master's degree. So it's not to say, and it's not to deter you from not applying to a position that, is something maybe where you don't necessarily meet that qualification. You should always put your name in the hat if you get really close to it. If you meet the qualifications of 4 out of 5 of the qualifications, then absolutely still apply. Let that system go through and do that work. Let that recruiter and that hiring manager go through and really take the chance and the time to review you as a candidate. Don't hurt yourself in that process, but know that it's not uncommon for these applicant tracking systems to be set up to weed out those unqualified candidates. And then you'll also see this with licensures and certifications if there are specific areas of training that is required, and even a specific numbers of years of experience. Those candidates who don't meet these qualifications will automatically be removed. One of the most interesting and shocking things to consider are the results of a report that was completed by EBI in 2017. And what they found was that only 2% of applicants are called for an interview. So as you can see, since there are so many applicants, companies use technology into their advantage. In addition, the use of the ATS also helps to remove the possibility of discrimination. So, did you know that the government requires companies to report equal employment opportunity statistics? So, what this actually means is that the robot is going to ensure that you are not discriminated against due to your race, background, experience, disability status, etc. So, all these things that you could be removed from if a hiring manager has a preference, and legally they're not allowed to do it, but this is going to help make sure that only your qualifications are being reviewed, nothing else. And just being able to get past that gatekeeper and being able to show, I am a qualified candidate, that's going to be a huge help to you in the application process. And then another main purpose of the ATS is to simply help the recruiter stay organized. Again, recruiters have a lot going on. Since their job is to identify the most qualified candidates, the automation of these systems really helps to keep them on track and keep track of the individuals and keep track of all of the candidates. These and that's really important to remember with a recruiter because they have goals. They have goals that they need to work to meet as well. These goals include locating qualified candidates and moving quickly through them and getting them to start as soon as possible. Again, just imagine if you had to sit there and sift through 3,000 resumes a week and go through all of the other components of your job as well. So that means scheduling interviews, doing phone screens, scheduling those interviews with those hiring managers. If an offer can be extended, maybe the recruiter has to extend the offer. So there's so many different moving pieces that a recruiter has to do that it's not just about scheduling that interview. It definitely would not be an easy task to go through everything with 3,000 resumes a week that they're also sifting through. So that applicant tracking system, yes, it does make their life easier, but it's also to hopefully give you better better experience as a job candidate. Yes, it can feel like it's frustrating to us sometimes. And I understand because sometimes you feel like it's just to annoy you as the job seeker, especially when you have to copy and paste everything that's on your resume into the application itself. Yes, it's time consuming, it's annoying, but all of these steps are important and pertinent to moving forward into the next to get past that applicant tracking system. So as you can see, there are many reasons why companies use these applicant tracking systems and the resume robot to help get candidates in the door and fill their openings as fast as possible. Although it can be frustrating for you as a job searcher, it can also really benefit you. And that's the one big thing that if you walk away from with tonight's presentation, I hope you recognize and I hope that you realize that, they're not out to get you. They're not out to hurt you. It can really work and benefit you in so many different ways. But the question really lies in how these systems are identifying quality and qualified candidates. What are they really looking for? And how do you, as a job searcher, maximize your chances to be considered for that position? Well, the most important thing to remember is that every applicant tracking system is different. So, although you will see most companies use one of them, it's hard to be able to know exactly which one they're using, which version of that applicant tracking system that they're using, and how to beat that specific system. So, regardless of which system that they use, there are still some general things that you can do to help you to feel prepared and to increase your chances of moving on in that process. The first thing to think about is that the system is going to scan your resume to quote unquote qualify you. So when it's scanning your resume, it is looking for keywords and phrases and relevant information. Remember how I said that companies use these to weed out unqualified candidates? Well, this is exactly how they're doing it. So this means that even if you're the most qualified candidate in the world for that position and that job description, maybe that job description was written just for you, it still doesn't mean that you're going to move on in that process, because if you don't have the right number of keywords, the right types of keywords, or the right phrases from that job description, that resume robot might not consider you as a qualified candidate, which means that you may never even be moved forward on get your resume or application materials onto a recruiter or a hiring manager's desk. Because if that system is saying, nope, John Smith, he's just not qualified over there, automatically it's just going to remove him and go back through everyone else who does meet those initial qualifications. Now, it's also going to look at relevant information. So again, if the company requires or prefers individuals with specific degrees or experiences working in certified fields, the resume robot is looking for that specific information. Another thing that it may do is it may locate any spelling or grammar errors. Hiring managers don't want to hire someone who's not attentive to details or is not taking their job search seriously. Since you are looking to be a professional in the field, the robot is going to qualify you based on your ability to do some of these most simplest tasks. So you want to make sure that when you're going through and you're preparing for this, that you're really that you're putting your best foot forward. Keep in mind too that if your resume even does get past that applicant tracking system and it would have some grammar or spelling errors, that's going to be an immediate red flag when it gets onto the hiring manager's desk as well, just because that hiring manager is going to see those and is going to automatically, think that you're not a qualified candidate. So this is why a lot of the times your applicant tracking systems out there are going to be scanning for those, so that way they're not wasting that hiring manager's or that recruiter's time. Now, I also said, like probably 2 minutes ago, that every robot is different. Some will use what is considered a checklist system, which is when if the robot indicates that you meet the requirements, that your resume is immediately sent on to the recruiter for a review. And this is different where some other systems are based off of a point value system. So for instance, if you have 10 keywords on your resume, you may get like 1 point for each of those words. If you have 20 points on your resume, you may get 2 points, or you may get 1 point for every word, but that's going to be doubled. The keywords plus your other types of experience, so your keywords plus maybe the years of experience that you have, or your military experience, or even your education, may also all be added up, and then candidates who meet a specific number are considered, or maybe only the top 5 candidates are considered for the phone interview. And it's hard, like I said before, you'll never know going into it, going into an applicant tracking system and going into the application process, which way and which version it's going to be. But no matter what, you can see if anything, that's why it's really important to focus on the relevant information, including those keywords, those key phrases, really making sure that you're going to stand out from the rest of the crowd, because once they are able to review you, whether it's from these point systems or from a checklist, it's going to make that competition much more competitive. Because now at this point, now we've located and qualified maybe 10 candidates have very similar backgrounds to you. So now you're in the running, but now you need to be able to make sure that that you're doing everything possible to move forward. So what can you do to knock out both your competition and the resume robot? So the first thing that you want to consider is you want to make sure that you're keeping your format very simple. Now, I know that you all might be thinking that a fancy resume that looks different is going to really help you to stand out from the crowd. But here's the thing and the truth of the matter about this. The more complex your resume formatting is, the harder it may be for the resume robot or the applicant tracking system to review the content on your resume. So this means that you want to use a plain text version of your resume when you're submitting it onto the website. I know that not everyone knows what a plain text version really means. So the best way that I could pretty much describe this to you would be that if you can find the symbol information on the keyboard, or you can use your keyboard commands on your computer, that means that it's plain text. So what does that mean that your resume should not include? Do not include things like lines, symbols, pictures, backgrounds, borders, or text boxes. You also want to try to avoid columns as well, just because you don't know how that applicant tracking system is going to be able to read them. All of these items can make your resume illegible by the applicant tracking system. And if the robot can't read your resume, you're not going to advance to the next steps of the process. You also want to make sure that you're matching those keywords and those key phrases on your resume with the job description. So what does that mean for you? This means that you will most likely have to make minor adjustments to your resume with each job that you apply to. I know, it's annoying. No one wants to really be able to and take the time to make those adjustments on your resume with each application that you submit. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a huge factor. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather spend 30 seconds to 3 minutes on just making small tweaks on my resume for each job that I applied to rather than spending hours upon hours hitting the apply button and never hearing back and never getting an interview. When you're going back and you're making these adjustments, they don't have to be revamping your entire resume. There are some different places and things that you can make those edits and make those tweaks that are really going to help to make it not feel so time consuming. And I would also want to note that if you are trying to build that resume to get past the applicant tracking system, make sure you're sending it to your career services representative for review. He or she is very familiar with many of the keywords and phrases that are going to come across with the job posting so that he or she can really help you to increase your chances of getting that interview without necessarily needing to constantly make large adjustments to your resume. And there may be times, especially depending on the types of positions that you're applying to, if they're all very similar, you might really not need to make any adjustments per each application. But it is something that you want to be aware of just in case. In addition, think about the way that you can include more of the keywords and key phrases. So one of the items that you can look at with doing this to make those small and minor tweaks would be starting your resume out with either a background or a professional summary rather than an objective. I would recommend you to always use one of these because not only do they give you areas that are very easy for you to notate and include keywords and phrases from the job description that align with your skill set and backgrounds, but they also help you to highlight goals that help you to attract the attention of the hiring managers and recruiters. So for more information about building a background and professional summary, again, reach out to your career services representative or be sure to check out some of our webinars coming up next month for National Career Development Month that you would be able to really learn a lot more about resume writing. You also want to make sure that you proofread and use spell checks. So remember how I mentioned right before that the resume robot might be scanning your resume to see who's the most professional candidates that meet the requirements of the desired position? That's right. Well, here you go. By taking the time to just proofread your resume, you are eliminating the chance that you might not be considered for an interview. And then lastly, be sure to focus on your skills and achievements as well. And this is what's really, really important that a lot of people miss, if anything. When you are focused on demonstrating your achievements and the accomplishments that you had, you're really going to stand out from the rest of the crowd. Most people think that a resume should just be something where you list your duties and your tasks. But think about it this way, guys. A hiring manager can easily access your job description. Or, if you're applying for a job that's very similar to what you're currently doing, a hiring manager can assume the types of things that you need to complete on a day-to-day basis. What the hiring manager can't see is that impact that you've made on that company, that value that you've added to that organization, and that value that you could potentially add to them. And they want to bring on employees who want to succeed, want to excel, want to learn, want to grow. Because if they're hiring these types of employees, one, the employees are probably going to spend more time with them as a company, which is going to save them money on so many different ways. It's also going to increase their revenue as well. But two, it also helps to make sure that they feel confident that bringing you on board is not going to be something that's going to be extremely challenging. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at this and really put it into action. So here you're going to see a job description for a help desk representative. What I want us to do at this point is I want you to pull up the Q&A box after reading this job description and type in some of the keywords and the key phrases that you're seeing in this job posting. So go ahead and type into the Q&A box. What are some key things that you think would be important for someone who's applying to this help desk representative job? So someone typed listen to and resolve customer issues. Absolutely. Customer service is going to be huge in something, especially like a role like this. So being able to really interact with customers, feeling strong on your communication skills is going to be a big factor to someone being successful in this role. What else do we have? Have great communication skills? Yep, absolutely. What about some job specific? Yep, experience in troubleshooting. Wonderful. Have a high school diploma, some PC skills. Yeah, absolutely. So the great thing about where you're at here with being at South College is that you would want to on any of your resumes, you want to include your South College degree, even if you're still working in still working on obtaining it. You always want to include it with an anticipated graduation date, because what that's going to do is, let's say hypothetically, this job description or another one that's very similar stated that, oh, well, we would prefer someone with a college degree. Well, now you can put on there that you might not have it, but you can insinuate when you're supposed to get it. So absolutely, you guys nailed that one. Let's go ahead and take a look at one more. So this position, this is an example for a customer service representative. So go ahead, take a couple minutes to read this and let me know what you think are the most important or some of the key words and key phrases as well. Strong communication. Yep. So again, any type of customer service role that you're going to be in there, you're going to typically see that communication is going to be really important and really pertinent. When you're including communication on your resume, what I would say that you would want to do is you would want to include it in not necessarily a skill section because it's a transferable skill, but that you would want to demonstrate it in your bullet points for either any of your previous jobs, talking about how you communicated well with others and or as well as in that professional or background summary. Some experience with Zendesk and Salesforce, absolutely. So this might be something that if you don't have experience with it, though, you wouldn't want to include it on your resume. If you've maybe worked with one of these once or twice, you would want to include it on there. Just letting them know what types of things that you've worked with. But chances are you've also probably worked with some CRM at some point, which is just a customer resource management tool. So you've probably worked with that at some point or another. If you were in a customer service role, that would make it a little bit easier as well. So one of the things that we've said is able to work well as a team. Absolutely. So we want to talk about our collaboration skills, how we build rapport with those around us. That's also going to help with that customer service piece. And then we have like someone who mentioned specifically stating like, yep, 1+ year of experience in customer service. So when we're talking about, and this is going to come really important in our professional summaries and our background summaries on our resume, is that we're going to really dive deeper into that and tell them exactly how many years of experience that we have. What's probably and most likely going to happen is that that applicant tracking system is probably going to be scanning your resume for looking for so many years of experience in customer service. So as long as it's going to see that it's above any number greater than one, if you had just even the years experience in customer service on your resume, that's probably going to be enough to trigger it and get you past that point, for that hiring manager or that recruiter to review. I also see some things about mentioning like being detail oriented, being able to follow instructions, prioritize and multitask. There are some things, when we're talking about being being attentive to details. Those are things we can absolutely include in our professional summary as well, as in like some of our bullet points. But the one major thing that you want to think about too is that if you're going to say that you're detail oriented, then you want to make sure on your resume that the formatting is consistent throughout the entire thing. One, you should always have that no matter what you're looking for, but you want your resume to also showcase some of those skills wherever possible without you necessarily needing to include those words right on your skill. Yes, those are going to help you get past the applicant tracking system, but if you get past the applicant tracking system and it's very clear that you aren't detail oriented and I'm a hiring manager and I'm looking for someone who's detail oriented, and your resume looks like a mess, I'm not going to pursue you as a candidate. So it's really important to kind of think about how not only the resume robot interacts with your job search and how that can impact your job search, but also just how you present yourself as well. But absolutely, with being able to prioritize and multitask, these are great things that you want to be able to include. I would imagine that it says fast paced call center right at the very top. So if you've ever worked in a fast paced environment, you want to be able to, one, demonstrate that it was a fast pace, that you're used to being able to work at fast paced environments, but that's really where that prioritizing and that multitasking is going to come into play. So being able to kind of include those all in one and lump them together, that's going to be really important as well. So great job. See, this is all very doable. It does take time to help kind of prepare and get past that applicant tracking system. But when you put in the work and you take the time in the front end, it makes it a lot easier going forward in the back end. So definitely, keep these types of tips in mind. Practice does make perfect. So we want to continue to practice. You want to take the time to read each of the job descriptions as you move forward for when you're applying to positions. But in that way, you can make sure that you're adding some information when you need to. Because don't forget, the more that you can add on your resume, that's going to make it seem like your background was built for this position, the better that it's going to be. With that being said, too, so beating the resume robot goes beyond just the resume. And I didn't include this in the presentation, but I do want to just touch base on it. And one of the things that you're going to see, especially as you enter more professional positions, is that you always want to also create and submit a cover letter with your resume. It really helps to make you be viewed as a professional, and it's really going to help to take you to the next level. So when you're doing that, that's also going to be another area and another resource that you can utilize to really maximize those keywords, those key phrases, and to really make sure that it is specific and geared towards that position. The great thing about if you're able to build a really great resume, where you know that you want to work in a specific type of position, it's very easy for us in career services to help you build that resume geared towards those types of positions. So at the end of the day, again, you probably wouldn't need to go in and make a lot of tweaks or even adjustments at all. But where you would still want to make sure that you're doing that is in your cover letter, because there are specific things that the applicant tracking system might even be looking for within that cover letter as well. They might even say, well, we want to give priority to anyone who does submit a cover letter. So lots of different things to keep in mind. There's not just a one answer for everything. There's not a one and only one solution, but there are things that you do want to consider. So hopefully now you have a thorough understanding of what you really need to do to beat the resume robot. I always encourage you to continue to go through and to continue to practice these and to utilize these skills, as well as reach out to your career services representative for additional assistance as well. But before we end today's session, I would like to just open up the floor to see what specific questions you have about applicant tracking systems that I might be able to answer for you, and how I can help you to feel even more prepared for that next job that you go and apply to. So if you want to go ahead, type in any questions that you have, I'll go ahead and start answering them. So one question that I did see come across said that I've heard that it's better to submit my resume in a PDF version. Is that true? So this is going to be where I would say that you really want to focus on what the you really want to read the job description and the application instructions, because every instruction is going to say something different. Generally speaking, there is a thought process out there that says PDFs tend to be better, because what PDFs are typically able to do is that they're able to compress all the coding from the back end of a Microsoft Word document to make it still appear with just the words. So I think that, if you have the ability, it's not a bad thing to go ahead and save it into a PDF version, but you do always want to read those instructions before you're just hitting the submit button to your application and your resume, just because you want to make sure that it's going to be set in that preferred version. If a company does prefer either a PDF version or a Microsoft Word version, they will let you know right there in the submissions, or they'll tell you what the acceptable formats are. So you always want to make sure that whatever version and whatever formatting that you're going to be submitting it in, that it is that way. In addition, the one thing I would like to note on just how you should submit your resume is you should also focus on the naming convention of your resume. So what do I mean when I'm saying naming convention? I mean, you want to focus on including a very specific name to your resume. Don't just call it resume. We know that it's saved on your computer and you know that your resume, it's your resume. But here's the thing about applicant tracking systems. A lot of times, and I've seen this as a hiring manager myself, is that depending on the applicant tracking system that I've used before, is when someone would submit their resume and it was called just resume, and I had narrowed it down to 5 candidates and all 5 candidates' resumes said resume, and that's how it was titled. That was how they were forwarded to me in the system, which made it extremely difficult to remember whose resume I liked more to narrow it down to who I wanted to call in for an interview. My best piece of advice would be moving forward that you always want to name your resume your first name, last name, resume, and maybe even include either the specific job title that you're applying for or the specific company that you're applying for. Keep in mind, applicant tracking systems tend to have a limit of characters for about, like, I think it's 39 or 49 characters. So a lot of times, you don't want the naming convention to be super long, but you do want to make it something more recognizable than just resume. So that way that hiring manager can easily be like, oh, I remember I liked John Smith as a candidate, so I'm going to go to John Smith. Is there a limit to how long my resume should be when it's going through the applicant tracking system? That's a great question. So again, I would say when you're talking about length and formatting of your resume, you still want to try and keep it to 1 page, because here's the thing. Once it goes through the applicant tracking system and that resume robot scans it and to identify those keywords and it qualifies you, your resume is still getting forwarded on to a hiring manager for review. The hiring manager, most recent statistics have shown that hiring managers and recruiters are spending an average of 6 seconds to look at your resume. 6 seconds. That's not long at all. So with that being said, if your resume ends up being more than 1 page and the hiring manager or that recruiter is just kind of sifting through all of those, pieces, it's going to make it very challenging and um, very hard for that individual to really get and process all the information that's on your resume. Should you include employers you have been discharged from, also short-term employers? So this is where I would say meeting with your career services representative is going to be really important for your specific situation. And the reason for this is that everyone's situation is different. So there could be, depending on what your background looks like, if you've had 10, 15 employers in the last 10 years, no, you could probably get away with not including them on your resume. Keep in mind, there might become a moment in an interview where the hiring manager might ask you, oh, have you ever been fired from a job? If so, what happened? And then you would still want to give them the honest truth and show how you've learned from that. But as far as, it's not necessarily going to hurt you, but it might also, if it was a huge gap between being discharged from that employer to starting another new job. So it's very one-on-one basis. So it's really tough to kind of kind of answer that question. I think it's a great question. What I would suggest at the conclusion of this presentation, either send me an email with the question or just shoot me an email letting me know that you have these questions, that you'd like to get some one-on-one guidance, and I'd be more than happy to schedule an appointment with you to go through all that with you as well. And then our next question is, what do I do if I do not have the number of years of experience that is required by the job description? So again, you still want to try and apply as long as you're close to that, close to those years. You typically want to try and apply. Let the employer tell you no. There are some things that you can always do to kind of fill in that gap, and make it appear that you have the number of years of experience. So for instance, what you could do is you could just say the number of years of experience that you've been a professional, and then go into more detail about where your years of experience are in the rest of your resume. You also could go through and, like for that would probably be the best thing for as far as years go. If you're talking about specific content, like maybe they want you to have a certification that you don't have, or it's preferred that you have a certification, in your background summary, you could say something like plans to obtain this certification. And what that would do is that includes the keyword on your resume. So that way you can get past the applicant tracking system, but yet you're still being truthful. So that way when the hiring manager or that recruiter reviews it, they're going to be able to see that, oh, you have plans to pursue this. This is great. So that will help you to at least get to that human being to be considered for that position. In your professional experience, what are the top sections that should be included on a resume? Is there a max on sections placed on your resume? Very specific question to you as an individual. Generally speaking, I would say, as a current student, the flow of your resume will typically be a summary of some sort at the top, goes into your education, because your education is your newest and most recent relevant experience, hopefully to whatever direction and field you're looking to get into, and then going into your professional or work experience. You could also have an areas of expertise or skills section on your resume. If it's an areas of expertise, I like to personally throw it up between the summary and your education, because again, you're maximizing, you can use that section to help you maximize your keywords and your key phrases for that applicant tracking system. But after that, you might need an award section or an achievement section, but generally speaking, you're not. You don't want to have things like personal information. You want to keep your resume very specific to that type of job and to that industry, just because, again, a hiring manager is only taking 6 seconds to review it. So you want to maximize your chances and let that hiring manager see everything about you up to that point. How long should a resume be? I've heard that it is not wise to have more than one page. Is that true? Absolutely. The only exception I would say to this rule would be if you have over 10 years of progressive experience and you're looking at going at more of an executive level. If you're going at something that's going to be more of an executive level, then you might need that, you might need that 2-pager resume. The other way that you might need a longer resume is if you are in education, so the field of education. If you are in the field of education, you would actually typically be building what's called a CV. So you wouldn't necessarily be a resume, and your CV is just generally longer because it will have things like about your research and any publications and those types of pieces. In addition, the other exception to this 1-page rule is if you're applying for a federal job, just because the federal agencies have a different preference of the type of material that's on your resume and the order of the material that's on your resume. So if you plan on applying for a federal job and you would like some additional information on that, we do have a federal job search webinar that I can always send you that link to watch the recording for as well. And then do we have any additional questions? All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending today's session. If you do have any other questions or if you'd want to take any conversations offline, my contact information is on your screen. So please do not hesitate to let me know. I'm more than happy to schedule an appointment with you and to kind of see how I can help you and help guide you to the next step. In addition, I did just want to remind everyone to continue to watch out for future webinars in the future. We have a lot of great topics coming up in November. It will be National Career Development Month. So if you're really thinking about how to prepare for your career and for your next job search, you'll definitely want to attend some of those webinars and those sessions as well. In addition, at the conclusion of tonight's presentation, you will find just a brief survey for you to complete. The survey just lets us know here at South College what additional information and additional training that you would like to see, so that way we can continue to meet your needs as students. We do care about what you need in order to be successful. We always want to give you the best chance. So definitely please make sure that you take a moment to complete the brief 4 questions at the conclusion of this presentation. With that being said, again, thank you so much, everyone, for attending this evening, and I hope that you have a wonderful evening. Have a good one, guys.